Everyone believed him. From the moment he spoke, people nodded. From the moment he cried, people forgave. From the moment he said, "I loved her," the story was decided. Her name was Alina. And the man everyone believed was her husband, Mark. Alina died on a quiet Sunday morning. No warning, no public argument, no dramatic scene, just a phone call, then silence. Mark told everyone the same thing. She wasn't feeling well, she was stressed. She had been tired for weeks. He said it softly, calmly, as if he had already practiced the words. At the funeral, Mark stood closest to the coffin. He held Alina's photo with both hands. His voice cracked at the right moments. He thanked people for coming, he hugged her parents. He even apologized for not noticing the signs sooner. And that sentence alone erased doubt from most minds. Because people trust someone who blames themselves. Alina's mother noticed something strange. Mark never touched the coffin, not once. He didn't kiss it, didn't place his hand on it. He just stood near it like it was an object, not a person. But grief looks different on everyone. That's what people say when they don't want to think deeper. Alina's younger sister, Clara, stood at the back. She watched everything. She watched Mark cry when people were watching, and stop crying the moment they weren't. She watched how he answered questions too quickly, how he already knew what to say when someone asked how Alina had been. Almost like he had memorized her final version. Clara hadn't spoken to Alina properly in months, not because they fought, but because Alina slowly stopped replying. Messages turned short, calls went unanswered. And when Clara asked Mark about it, he always said the same thing. She's just overwhelmed. She needs space. She doesn't like to talk when she's stressed. Clara believed him. Because believing him was easier than imagining something was wrong. After the funeral, people gathered at the house. Alina's house. The one she bought before marriage. The one Mark now walked through like it had always belonged to him. People drank tea, shared memories. Mark told stories about Alina that sounded gentle but incomplete. She was sensitive, he said. She worried too much. She needed reassurance. The words sounded caring. But they placed her in a box, fragile, dependent, easy to explain away. Late that night, after most people left, Clara stayed behind. She helped clean the kitchen, she stacked plates. She wiped counters, she avoided Mark's eyes. Not because she hated him, but because something about him made her chest feel tight. Mark watched her quietly. "You can stay as long as you need," he said. Clara nodded. She went to Alina's bedroom. The room smelled like her. That familiar mix of shampoo and fabric softener. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and picked up Alina's phone from the nightstand. It was dead. She plugged it in. The screen lit up. Notifications flooded in. Missed calls, unread messages, emails. Dozens of them. Clara frowned. Alina wasn't ignoring people, she was disappearing, footsteps behind her. Mark stood in the doorway. "You don't need to go through that," he said calmly. Clara looked up. "I just want to see if she—" "I already handled her phone," Mark interrupted. "There's nothing important there." The way he said handled made Clara pause. She locked the phone without arguing, because arguing with grief feels cruel. Mark walked away, Clara stayed, and for the first time she noticed something odd. Alina's bedside drawer was empty, too empty. Alina kept everything: notes, chargers, receipts, tiny pieces of her life. Clara opened the closet. Clothes were still there, shoes still there, but the small pouch Alina always carried was gone. The one she kept her spare SIM card in. Clara remembered Alina once saying, half joking, "If I ever stop answering, check my phone properly." Clara brushed the thought away, because paranoia feels ugly after death. The next day, the police closed the case quickly. Natural causes, no sign of struggle, no forced entry. Mark answered questions politely. He never got defensive. He never hesitated. The officer even said, "You did everything right." And just like that, it was over. That's how easily stories end when no one asks the wrong questions. Weeks passed. Mark returned to work. People admired his strength. "How are you holding up?" they asked. Mark smiled sadly. "One day at a time." Alina's parents stopped visiting. It hurt too much. Clara came less often too. But one thing bothered her. Mark had changed Alina's phone number. He told everyone it was too painful to keep her line active. But Clara couldn't forget the unread notifications. One evening, Clara logged into Alina's cloud account. She still knew the password. Alina never changed it. Inside, she found photos, notes, voice memos, hundreds of them. Most were normal, grocery lists. reminders, random thoughts. But then she saw a folder labeled, "Just in case." Her stomach tightened. Clara hesitated. Opening it felt like betrayal, but closing it felt like abandonment. She tapped. Inside were voice recordings, dated, organized, short. Some only a few seconds long. Clara played the first one. Alina's voice filled the room, soft, careful. "If anyone is listening to this, I'm not okay." Clara's hands started shaking. She played the next one. "He says I'm imagining things, that I'm too sensitive." Another, "I don't know how to explain this to people. He's very calm when others are around." Another, "I feel like I'm disappearing in my own life." Clara sat down, her heart pounding. Then she saw the last recording. The date was 2 days before Alina died. The title wasn't dramatic, it was just one word. "Voicemail." Clara stared at it. She didn't press play. Not yet. Because something inside her knew, once she heard it, everything would change. If you're still listening right now, subscribe. Some stories don't reveal the truth all at once. They make you wait because the truth is heavy. Clara locked her phone. She stood up, and for the first time since Alina's death, she allowed herself to think the unthinkable. What if everyone believed the wrong person? What if Alina had tried to speak and no one was listening? And what if the most important thing she left behind wasn't meant to be found so soon? Because the voicemail was there, waiting. And once it played, there would be no going back. Clara didn't play the voicemail that night. She told herself she needed sleep. That grief makes you imagine patterns that aren't there. That reopening wounds doesn't bring people back. But the truth was simpler. She was afraid of what she would hear. The next morning, Clara returned to the house while Mark was at work. She moved carefully, like someone entering a place that could turn hostile at any moment. She sat at the kitchen table, Alina's phone in her hands. She opened the folder again. She pressed play. Alina's voice came through, low and steady, like she was trying not to be heard. "If you're listening to this, it means I didn't get a chance to explain things properly." A pause. A breath. "Mark doesn't hit me. That's why no one believes me. He doesn't need to." Clara's chest tightened. "He decides what's real. He tells people I'm emotional before I can speak for myself. He corrects my memories. He finishes my sentences." Another pause. "When I try to talk, he says I'm embarrassing him. When I stay quiet, he says I'm cold." The sound shifted, like the phone had moved. "I started recording because I was scared I'd forget who I used to be." Clara covered her mouth. The voicemail continued. "Yesterday, he said something strange. He said, 'People already see you the way I describe you.'" A soft laugh from Alina. Bitter, tired. "I think he's right." The recording ended. The kitchen felt smaller. Clara sat there for a long time, then she played another file, and another. They weren't dramatic. No screaming, no threats, just small moments. Mark telling Alina she was misremembering a conversation. Mark reminding her she couldn't manage finances. Mark joking in front of friends about her anxiety. Each recording alone sounded harmless. Together they formed a pattern. A slow erasing. Clara realized something painful. Mark didn't silence Alina, he replaced her voice. That afternoon, Clara went to the police station. She asked to speak to the same officer. She explained about the recordings. The officer listened politely, then sighed. "These are relationship issues," he said. "They don't prove foul play." Clara felt heat rise in her face. "There's a voicemail from 2 days before she died," she said. "She says she's not okay." The officer nodded sympathetically. "Lots of people feel overwhelmed," he said. That doesn't mean what?" Clara interrupted. "That it mattered." The officer stiffened. "Be careful," he said. "You don't want to turn grief into suspicion." Clara left shaking. On the way out, she passed Mark in the hallway. He smiled when he saw her. "Everything okay?" he asked. Clara forced a nod. "Yes," she said. Mark studied her for a second too long. That night Mark called her. His voice was calm, concerned. "I heard you went to the station," he said. Clara froze. "I was worried about you," he continued. "Grief can make people chase ghosts." Clara swallowed. "You changed Alina's phone number," she said. Mark laughed softly. "It was painful seeing her name pop up," he said. "I did it for my sanity." "For yours," Clara repeated. "Yes," Mark said easily. "We all cope differently." Clara didn't respond. Mark sighed. "I hope you're not listening to things out of context," he said. "Alina liked to dramatize her feelings." The word landed like a blade. Dramatize? Clara realized something terrifying. Mark knew about the recordings, not all of them, but enough. That night, Clara backed everything up. Cloud Drive email to herself. She labeled one folder clearly. Timeline, because this wasn't about emotions, it was about sequence. Dates, contradictions, what Mark said publicly versus what Alina recorded privately. The next day, Clara visited Alina's coworker, Jenna. They sat in a cafe. Clara played a short clip. Jenna's face changed. She used to apologize for nothing, Jenna said quietly. If she spoke up in meetings, she'd say sorry afterward. Clara nodded. Did Mark ever come to her office? She asked. Jenna hesitated. Once, she said. He corrected her in front of everyone, smiled while doing it. That night, Clara listened again. This time, she noticed something else. In one recording, Alina mentioned a time. Another mentioned a date. They didn't match Mark's story of her final week. Mark said she was improving. Alina recorded that she was planning something. I'm going to leave, Alina whispered in one clip. I just need proof first. Clara's breath caught. Leave. Not disappear, not collapse. Leave. Clara understood then. Alina didn't die as a woman who had given up. She died as a woman who was preparing to be believed. The realization changed everything. If Alina planned to leave, someone new. Someone who benefited from her staying silent. Clara thought of the voicemail again, the last one. The one she hadn't replayed fully. She returned to it. This time she listened past the pause. Alina's voice dropped even lower. He's in the other room. I don't think he knows I'm recording. A sound in the background. Footsteps. Alina whispered faster. If something happens to me, please don't believe the version that's easiest. The recording cut off. Clara stared at the screen. Her phone vibrated. A message from Mark. Everything okay? You've been quiet. Clara typed back slowly. Just listening. 3 dots appeared, then stopped, then appeared again. Mark replied. Be careful what you listen to. Some things are meant to stay private. Clara locked her phone. Her hands were steady now because fear had turned into clarity. Mark wasn't calm, he was careful. And careful people panic when timelines don't line up. If you're still with this story, subscribe. The truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers until someone decides to hear it. Clara opened her laptop. She began writing everything down. Not accusations, not conclusions, just facts, times, words, gaps. Because once the voicemail was played publicly, Mark wouldn't be able to control the story anymore. And the next step would force him into a place he couldn't edit. A place where recordings don't care who people believe. And once that door opened, there would be no closing it quietly. Clara didn't rush to expose anything. That was the mistake people always made. They heard one disturbing thing and ran straight into the light, hoping it would save them. Alina hadn't done that. She had waited. So Clara waited too. She started by building the timeline, not the emotional one. The factual one. Dates Mark remembered clearly. Dates Alina recorded quietly. They didn't match. Mark told everyone Alina's last week had been calm. He said she slept more, smiled more, talked about the future. But Alina's recordings told a different story. On Tuesday, Alina whispered she was afraid to sleep. On Wednesday, she said Mark had checked her phone while she showered. On Thursday, she recorded a message she never labeled, just sighed into the mic and said, I don't know how to leave without him noticing. Friday was quiet, no recording. Saturday had one line. If I don't answer tomorrow, it's not because I didn't try. Sunday was the day she died. Clara stared at the screen. One missing piece bothered her. The voicemail. The one Alina titled clearly. Clara replayed it again, slower this time. She listened past the fear, past the whispering. And then she heard something she missed before. A sound. Very faint. Metal against glass, like a cup being placed down. Then Mark's voice. Not speaking to Alina, speaking to himself. I can't do this again. The sound cut. Clara felt her pulse in her ears. Again, not once, again. That word didn't belong in a story of sudden illness. It belonged in a pattern. Clara needed help, not the police, not yet. She contacted a digital forensics consultant. Someone who analyzed audio for a living. She didn't explain the whole story. She didn't need to. She sent one file. The voicemail. The consultant replied 2 days later. There's no sign of editing, he wrote. But there is background audio you might want to isolate. They isolated it, cleaned it, removed the hiss. What came through was clearer, Mark's voice again, still low, still casual. I told you to stop recording. Clara's stomach dropped. The consultant added one more note. There's also a time discrepancy. The metadata suggests the file was saved later than the timestamp shown. Saved later. Not recorded later, saved, which meant someone accessed the phone after the recording ended. Someone who knew where it was, someone who had time. Clara thought of the night Mark stood in the doorway and said, "I already handled her phone." That afternoon, Clara visited Alina's parents. She didn't play the recordings yet. She asked questions, careful ones. "What was Alina like the last time you spoke?" Her mother frowned. "She sounded hopeful," she said. "She said she had a plan." Mark never mentioned that. Her father looked away. "She asked me something strange," he said. "She asked if we would believe her if things got complicated." Clara nodded slowly. Mark had always controlled the narrative before Alina could speak. Before anyone could ask. That evening, Mark showed up unannounced at Clara's apartment. He smiled like a man checking on family. "You've been distant," he said gently. Clara let him in. She offered water. She watched his eyes scan the room, looking for phones, laptops, anything recording. Mark sat, relaxed, too relaxed. "You know," he said, "people are starting to talk. I don't want your grief to turn into rumors." Clara met his gaze. "What rumors?" she asked. Mark paused just for a second, then smiled. "People misunderstand things when they're emotional." There it was again, that word, emotional, Alina's favorite cage. Clara leaned back. "Do you remember what you were doing the night before Alina died?" she asked. Mark didn't hesitate. "Of course," he said. "We watched a movie. She fell asleep early." Clara nodded. "Which movie?" she asked. Mark blinked. "Does that matter?" he said, laughing softly. "Yes," Clara said, "it does." Mark's smile tightened. He stood up. "I think you need rest," he said. "This isn't healthy." Clara didn't stop him. She didn't need to because now she knew. Mark didn't fear accusations. He feared details. That night, Clara received an email from Alina's cloud account. Scheduled, dated months ago. Subject line, "If you're reading this, trust yourself." Inside was a list. Short, clear. Passwords, account numbers, and one final sentence. "If Mark tells this story for me, it won't sound like me." Clara closed her laptop. She didn't cry, because grief had transformed into something steadier, purpose. The next step wasn't public, it was strategic. She requested a formal review, not of Alina's death, of Mark's access, phone logs, account activity, device synchronization. Things calm people forget leave trails. If you're still listening, subscribe. Some stories don't move fast, they move carefully because care is what keeps the truth intact. The response came quicker than expected. Mark had accessed Alina's phone after her death, multiple times. Before the funeral, before notifying family, before anyone thought to ask why. Clara stared at the report. This wasn't proof of murder, but it was proof of interference, of control continuing after death. And that was enough to reopen questions. The final line in the report read, "User activity inconsistent with stated timeline." Clara smiled for the first time in weeks, because timelines don't argue, they just wait. And the next place timelines are examined carefully is in a room where silence doesn't protect anyone. A room where recordings are played, where stories are questioned, where belief is no longer enough. And Mark was about to walk into that room, whether he was ready or not. The room was smaller than Clara expected. Neutral walls, a long table, a recorder placed in the center like an eye that never blinked. Mark sat across from her, hands folded, posture calm, too calm. The investigator explained the process. Routine questions, timeline clarification, nothing accusatory. Mark nodded politely. "I'm happy to help," he said. "Anything to clear confusion." Confusion, that word again. Clara waited. The investigator asked about the phone. Mark answered smoothly. "Yes, I accessed it to inform family, to handle affairs." Before the funeral, the investigator asked. Mark didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" Mark smiled sadly. "It was unbearable seeing her name light up," he said. "I needed closure." The investigator wrote something down. Clara watched Mark's eyes, not his mouth. Eyes tell you when a story is being managed. Then Clara spoke. "I'd like to submit audio," she said. Mark's fingers tightened slightly. The investigator nodded. "Go ahead." Clara pressed play. The room filled with Alina's voice. Soft, measured. "If you're listening to this, I'm not okay." Mark stared at the table. He didn't look shocked. He looked prepared. The recording continued. Alina described being corrected, doubted, quietly erased. The investigator's pen slowed. Mark shifted in his chair. Clara watched his jaw tighten. Then the voicemail played, the one titled simply. The whisper, the fear, and then the sound, metal against glass, a breath, Mark's voice. "I told you to stop recording." The room froze. The investigator looked up. "Is that you?" he asked. Mark didn't answer immediately, then he laughed lightly. "That could be anything," he said. "Audio artifacts happen." Clara spoke calmly. "It was isolated by a forensic analyst," she said. "The metadata shows the file was saved later." The investigator turned to Mark. "Saved later?" he asked. Mark cleared his throat. "I don't know how these things work," he said. "Technology can be misleading." The investigator nodded slowly. "Technology can be," he said. "People less so?" The questioning continued, details, dates. Mark answered most of them well, until one question landed differently. "Why did you change Alina's number?" Mark shrugged. "For my mental health." Before notifying her family, Mark paused just long enough. "I didn't think." The investigator raised a hand. "That wasn't the question." Mark's voice lost warmth. "I did what I thought was best," he said. The meeting ended without confrontation, but Mark left knowing something had shifted, because the room didn't believe him. Outside, Mark confronted Clara. "You're enjoying this," he said quietly, "destroying her memory." Clara looked at him. "You destroyed her voice," she said. "I just turned the volume up." Mark's smile vanished. That night, the voicemail leaked. Not publicly, selectively, to legal counsel, to a review board, to one journalist known for patience. Not headlines, patterns. The article didn't accuse, it asked questions. It played a short clip. Not the whole voicemail, just enough. The reaction was slow, then steady, then impossible to stop. People began listening differently. Friends remembered moments they dismissed. Coworkers recalled apologies that never made sense. Neighbors remembered silence after arguments. Mark's workplace placed him on leave. "Until matters are clarified." He called Clara. His voice wasn't calm now. "You promised you wouldn't do this," he said. "I promised nothing," Clara replied. "You're ruining everything," he snapped. Clara breathed in. "You did that when you told her who she was allowed to be." Mark hung up. That night he tried to delete what he could, accounts, backups, logs. But deletions leave marks, and marks leave trails. The investigator called Clara the next morning. "We need you to come in," he said. "This has escalated." The next meeting wasn't quiet, it was formal. Legal counsel present. Records projected, timelines aligned. Mark's access logs displayed clearly. After death, before reporting, before anyone else touched the phone. Mark's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. Mark stared straight ahead. For the first time, he didn't speak, because now the story wasn't his to tell. The voicemail played again, this time in a room full of people who took notes. Alina's whisper echoed, not as emotion, as evidence. If you're still listening, subscribe. Some stories turn when the truth is heard by people who can't look away. When the meeting ended, the investigator said one sentence. "We're reopening the case." Mark stood slowly. His control hadn't shattered, it had slipped. And slipping control makes careful people desperate. Outside, Clara felt the weight of it. Not relief, responsibility. Because once a story becomes public, it belongs to more than one person. And the next phase would be louder, messier. Unforgiving, Mark wasn't finished trying to control the ending. But endings don't belong to those who manage silence. They belong to those who finally let the truth speak. And the truth was speaking now, clearer than ever. The shift didn't happen with shouting, it happened with silence. Mark noticed it first at work. People stopped making eye contact. Emails became formal. Meetings were postponed, not canceled. Postponed, which meant people were waiting. Waiting to see which version of him would survive. The article spread slowly. Not viral, credible, careful. It didn't say Mark killed Alina. It asked why her voice was never heard. It quoted experts on coercive control. It played a longer section of the voicemail. Alina's whisper reached thousands of ears, and something uncomfortable happened. People recognized it. Comments appeared. "She sounds like my sister. This is how my ex talked to me. I thought this was normal." The narrative cracked. Mark tried to speak. He released a statement. Short, sympathetic. He said he loved Alina. He said recordings don't show context. He said grief was being weaponized, but something was different now. People weren't asking how he felt. They were asking what Alina felt. Clara received messages daily, some supportive, some angry, some begging her to stop. "You're dragging this too far. You should let her rest." Clara read them all, then she closed her inbox. Because resting without truth is just silence with better lighting. Mark's lawyer requested mediation, a private resolution, no further recordings, no press. Closure. Clara declined, because closure without accountability is just permission. The formal hearing was scheduled, not a trial, a review, evidence presented, experts testified, audio analysis, behavioral patterns, timelines. Mark sat beside his lawyer, his posture tight, his calm rehearsed. When asked to speak, he stood. He described Alina as fragile, sensitive, overwhelmed. Words that once sounded caring now sounded strategic. Clara was asked one question. "Why did you keep listening?" She answered quietly. "Because she asked someone to." The voicemail played in full, no interruptions, no objections, just Alina's voice from beginning to end. The room didn't move. When it finished, someone in the audience was crying. Mark didn't look at anyone. He stared straight ahead, as if refusing eye contact could stop memory. The panel deliberated briefly. Their conclusion wasn't dramatic, it was devastating. They cited manipulation, post-death interference, intent to control narrative. They recommended criminal proceedings. Mark's lawyer whispered urgently. Mark didn't respond. Outside, reporters waited. Clara didn't stop. Mark did. He spoke into microphones for the first time. His voice shook. "I never meant to hurt her," he said, "but intention doesn't erase impact." And people knew that now. Sponsors withdrew. His workplace terminated him quietly. Friends stopped defending. Family stopped explaining. Mark went home to an empty house. He tried to listen to the voicemail alone. He stopped it halfway through, because control disappears when you hear yourself clearly. That night, Clara sat in her apartment, the city quiet, her phone silent. She felt something unexpected, not victory, not revenge, relief, because Alina's voice had done what Clara never could. It told the truth without asking permission. If you're still listening, subscribe. Some stories matter because they show how easily silence is mistaken for peace. The next day, charges were announced. Not just about Alina's death, about interference, manipulation, obstruction. Mark didn't fight publicly anymore. Because public belief was gone, and belief was his strongest weapon. Clara visited Alina's grave alone. She didn't speak much, just placed her hand on the stone and whispered one sentence. "They heard you," and for the first time that felt like enough. Because the hardest part wasn't proving Mark wrong, it was proving Alina right, and now the truth had witnesses. The final decision didn't come with applause. It came in a quiet room with papers signed and words chosen carefully. Mark was found responsible, not in the way movies show it. No shouting, no dramatic confession. Just a clear conclusion drawn from patterns, access, and intent. The report stated that Alina's death could no longer be treated as an isolated event. It was the end of a long process of control. The charges were specific. Interference with evidence, psychological coercion, obstruction. Mark listened as they were read. He didn't argue, he didn't interrupt, because he finally understood something. Control works best when people don't notice it, and fails completely once they do. The sentence wasn't what people expected. It wasn't about punishment alone. It was about record, permanent, unavoidable. Mark would never again be able to present himself as a calm, reliable authority over someone else's life. That mattered more than years because it removed access. Clara didn't attend the final hearing. She waited outside. She didn't need to watch. Alina's voice had already done the work. When it was over, the investigator stepped out. "It's done," he said simply. Clara nodded. She didn't cry. She had already done all her crying in rooms where no one was listening. Now people were listening. In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically improve. Grief doesn't disappear because justice shows up late, but something else did change. Clara stopped questioning herself, stopped replaying moments wondering if she should have noticed sooner, because the truth was clear now. Alina didn't fail to speak, she was prevented from being heard, and prevention leaves fingerprints. Clara received letters, not praise, recognition, from women who said they had started recording their own reality. From men who said they realized control didn't have to look violent to be dangerous. From families who said they were listening differently now. Clara kept one voicemail, not the last one, the first one. If anyone is listening to this, I'm not okay. She never edited it, never shared it publicly again, because its job was finished. One evening, Clara sat alone and thought about Mark, not with anger, with clarity. He wasn't a monster. He was worse. He was ordinary, careful, convincing, and that's why this mattered, because monsters are easy to spot. Ordinary control isn't. If you're still here, subscribe. Stories like this aren't meant to frighten you. They're meant to sharpen your awareness. Clara returned Elena's phone number to service, not to use it, to let it exist, because erasure had already taken enough. She moved forward slowly, not healed, but grounded. Because grounding comes from knowing the truth can survive pressure, that whispers can outlast speeches, that a single voicemail saved quietly can change an ending. This story doesn't end with revenge, it ends with responsibility, with listening. With the understanding that believing someone doesn't require proof first. Sometimes belief is what gives proof a chance to exist. Everyone believed him, until they listened to her, and once they did, there was no going back. The lesson is simple. If someone tells you they're not okay, don't wait for the story to become convenient. Don't wait for evidence to become tragic. Listen while the voice is still here, because silence is not peace. And truth, once heard, doesn't disappear again.